asked of our Divine Mother. Our Divine Mother says, with patience, strength, courage, and a calm and undoubtable energy, we shall prepare ourselves to receive the supramental force. With my love and blessing, says our Divine Mother. Words of our Divine Mother from the collected works of our Divine Mother, Volume 8, Question and Answers, date 9th May 1956, page 136. Question, Sweet Mother, where does our true spiritual life begin? For this, our Divine Mother says, the true spiritual life begins when one is in communion with the Divine in the psychic, when one is conscious of the Divine presence in the psychic and in constant communion with the psychic. Then the spiritual life begins, not before. The true spiritual life. When one is united with one's psychic being and conscious of the Divine presence and receives the impulses for one's action from this Divine presence, and when the will has become a conscious collaborator with the Divine will, that is the starting point. Before that, one may be an aspirant to the spiritual life, but one does not have a spiritual life, says our Divine Mother. Question, Sweet Mother, I would like to have the explanation of a sentence Sri Aurobindo has said somewhere. Materially, you are nothing. Spiritually, you are everything. Materially, you are nothing. Spiritually, you are everything. For this, our Divine Mother says that means that it is the spirit, the spiritual consciousness, and the Divine presence which give to life all its value, that without this spiritual consciousness and the Divine presence, life has no value. The same holds true for the individual, whatever his material capacities and the material conditions in which he lives. His only worth is that of the Divine presence and the spiritual consciousness in him. And so, from the point of view of the truth of things, a man who has no material possessions and no remarkable capacities or possibilities, but who is conscious of his psychic being and united with the Divine in him, is infinitely greater than a ruler upon earth or a millionaire who possesses considerable material power but is unconscious of his psychic being. From the point of view of the truth, it is like that. This is what Sri Aurobindo means. No apparent and outer things have any true value. The only thing which is valuable is the Divine consciousness and union with the Spirit. Question, Sweet Mother. According to what you said last time, there is still the question of those who are not consciously open to the new force. Then how will they be influenced? Will it be the spiritual force and not by the supramental? What is the difference between the spiritual force and the supramental? For this, a Divine Mother says influenced. For this, the child says, no, but you said those who have done nothing have not given themselves. How can they hope to be influenced or profit by these forces? Those who are here but are not consciously open, will they be influenced also? Will they be helped? For this, our Divine Mother says, but if they do not care to be helped, You want to help them despite themselves? Our Divine Mother says, if one aspires, want the help, even if the opening is very small, still there is necessarily some opening to know the Divine. But if one does not want to be helped, or rather, I would say there are people who are sure they don't need to be helped, they feel that they can help themselves quite well and they need no help, that it is they who do the work, they who make the progress, they who do everything. So they don't want help. They feel no need for it. Why do you want them to be helped when they don't care for it? For this the child says, but you said even the blind will be obliged to realize it. For this our Divine Mother says, I said it, that it will be visible even to those who are ill-willed. Is that what you mean? But that's quite different. When you receive a punch on the nose, you have to recognize something even though it hasn't helped you. The child says how to recognize this force. Mother says one is bound to open. Our Divine Mother says the whole world, whether it wants or not, whether it aspires or not, whether it recognizes or not, will sooner or later come under the influence of the supramental presence on earth. What a pity, for they had some meaning. They would not be ever knowing it if they are not receptive. They will receive half more than those who are even not open at all. This manifestation, sweet mother, will it make them aspire more? For this the Divine Mother says that I don't know. It must depend upon each one's case, for each one will be different. Set your mind at rest. It is quite all right. I would almost say, as the banner of Joan of Arc, you have shared in the labor, you will share in the glory. Then, are you satisfied? The child says, yes, sweet mother. Question, sweet mother, what should be our attitude towards this new consciousness? For this, our Divine Mother says that depends on what you want to do with it. If you want to look at it as a curiosity, you have only to watch it, try to understand. If you want it to change you, you must open yourself and make an effort to progress. Next date, 5th December 1956, page 376. Our Divine Mother says, now we are going to read what should be done to realize what was expressed in the 5 preceding paragraphs. Transform reason into ordered intuition. Let all thyself be light. This is thy goal. Transform effort into an even and sovereign overflowing of the soul's strength. Let all thyself be conscious force. This is thy goal. Transform enjoying into an even and objection ecstasy. Transform enjoying into an even and objectless ecstasy. Let all thyself be bliss. This is thy goal. Transform the divided individual into word personality. Transform the divided individual into the world personality. Let all thyself be the divine. This is thy goal. Transform the animal into the driver of the herds. Let all thyself be Krishna. This is thy goal. Taken from Thoughts and Glimpses, Volume 16, page 377. Our Divine Mother says this is what is to be done. I believe there is no need for any explanation. It is quite clear. For this the child says, sweet mother, here it's written, transform enjoying into an even and objectless ecstasy. For this our Divine Mother says, yes, this means it has no cause. Usually, one feels pleasure or joy or enjoyment due to this thing or due to that, from the most material things to things psychological or even mental. For example, to take a mental thing, you read a sentence which gives you a great joy, for it brings you a light, a new understanding, so that joy is a joy which has no object. Which has an object, it is because you read that sentence that you feel this joy. If you have not read that sentence, you won't have felt the joy. In the same way, when you hear beautiful music, or when you see a beautiful picture or a landscape that brings you joy, without those things you wouldn't have felt that joy. It is these which brought you joy. It is a joy which has an object, which has a cause. A Divine Mother says what Sri Aurobindo says is that this enjoying, this joy, pleasure, on whatever level it is, high or low, must be replaced by an inner bliss, which is communicated to the whole being and is continuous, even that is something that needs no reason, no cause for an existence. The cause is the contact with the divine bliss which is everywhere and in all things. So, once you are in relation with the universal and eternal bliss, you no longer need an outer object, an outer cause to have joy. It is objectless, and being objectless, it can be continuous even. Whatever the outer circumstances, whatever you may be doing, you are in the same state of joy, for this joy does not depend upon outer things, it depends upon inner conditions. You have found the source of joy in yourself, that is the divine presence. Communion with the divine, and having found the source of joy in yourself, you need nothing else, nothing whatsoever to have this joy. And as it is has no cause, it does not cease. It is a constant state. Then the child says the last paragraph, sweet mother, transform the animal into the driver of the herds. Let all thyself be Krishna. For this our divine mother says, oh, that is an image. The animal, that's all the instincts of the physical being, the needs of the physical being, and all the habits, all impulses, all the movements of the physical being, the need for food, for sleep, for activity, indeed all that constitutes the animal part of the being. And then Sri Aurobindo gives the image of Krishna, whom he describes as the driver of the herds, which is only an image, which means that it is the divine consciousness which takes the possession of all the activities of the physical being and directs and guides all those activities, all its needs, which controls and governs all the movements of the physical animal in man. Sri Aurobindo uses what could be called Indian mythology, taking Krishna as the symbol of the divine and the herds as the symbol of the animal instincts and animal needs of man. So, instead of being one of the animals of the herd, you become the one who leads the herds and governs all their movements instead of allowing them to dominate him. A Divine Mother says one is bound in ordinary life, one is bound to all these activities of the physical life and all the needs it represents, the need for food, sleep, activity, rest, etc. Well, instead of being an animal, that is, one subjected to these things and obliged to submit to them, one becomes the driver of the herd, whom Sri Aurobindo calls Krishna, that is, the divine who takes possession of all the movements of the being and guides and leads them in accordance with the divine truth. For this, the child says, Sweet mother, when one has a world personality, does one still need the individual personality? What is its use? For this, our Divine Mother says, but it is the individual personality which is transformed into the world personality. Instead of having the sense of the individual as he is ordinarily, this altogether limited individual, who is one little person amidst so many millions and millions of others, a little separate person, instead of feeling like that, this separate, isolated individual, little person amidst all the others, becomes aware of the world individuality, world personality, and naturally becomes divine. It is a transformation. It is one thing being transformed into another. And our Lord Sri Aurobindo does not mean that one loses one's body. He does not speak of the body. He speaks of the vital consciousness, the psychological consciousness, the sense of the separate individual. Just think, you as a child, you are one person amidst so many others, aren't you? Well, instead of being like that, you feel you are the world personality. This sense of division, separation goes away. This limitation disappears. But you remain in your body. You are not compelled necessarily to lose your body. The body is something else. And it is precisely the body that he is speaking about in the last paragraph. Transform the animal into the driver of the herds. When one begins a divine consciousness, a divine personality, then one can be the master of all the bodily activities because one is superior to them. One is not bound to these activities, not subject to them. One dominates them. One has a greater consciousness than that of the individual, of the little separate individual. One can make just a little more progress instead of being subject to all these animal needs of the being. One dominates them, but these are not two consciousness, one superimposed on the other. It is one consciousness being transformed into another. Looking at the child, our Divine Mother says, I'm afraid you didn't understand. She is looking at me completely, beloved. The child says, Sweet Mother, what are the characteristic features of a world personality? Then our Divine Mother says, the characteristic feature is precisely this change of consciousness. Instead of feeling like a little isolated person, separated from others, one feels one is a universal person containing all others and intimately united and identified with all the others. Then the child says, how does this person speak and act? For this, our Divine Mother says, speak. The question is not very well put. If you ask how he speaks, well, he speaks as everybody does, with his voice, with his tongue, with his words. If you were to ask what is the nature of what he speaks or says, if he expresses the state of consciousness in which he lives, he expresses a state of universal consciousness and seeing things in a different way from ordinary men. He expresses things different in accordance with what he sees and feels. For acting, if all the parts of his being are in harmony, his action will obviously express a state of consciousness. Now, there are people who have very decisive experience in one of the part of the being, but these are not necessarily translated or at least immediately in other parts of the being. It is possible that through sadhana or concentration or through grace, somebody has attained the consciousness of a world personality and that he still continues to act physically in an ordinary nondescript way because he has not taken care to unify his whole being. And though one part of his being is universally conscious, as soon as he begins to eat, sleep, or walk, he does do like this like human animals. That may happen, so it is again a purely personal question. It depends on each one on this stage of development. But if someone who has taken care to unify his being, to identify all his parts with the central truth, then naturally he will act with the total absence of egoism, understanding others, which comes to him as an identification of others. So he acts like a sage, but that depends on the care he has taken about the central consciousness. But this requires a great mastery and the realization of what Sri Aurobindo says in the last paragraph. Instead of remaining below, subject to the laws of nature, dominated by these laws and compelled to submit them, failing which one is completely unbalanced, one becomes the master. One looks at these things from above, knows the truth of these things, and imposes it upon body, which should normally accept it without any difficulty. Then the child says, "Sweet mother, what does ordered intuition means? Transform reason into ordered intuition." For this, our Divine Mother says, at the beginning, when one enters into contact with the realm of intuition, it is a sort of spasmodic contact. This is time to time, more or less explicable, or a conscious reasons, or suddenly has an intuition, or is possessed by the spirit of intuition. But it is not methodological, not a phenomenon that occurs at will, organized, obeying a central will. But Sri Aurobindo says that if the entire reason is transformed, he speaks of transformation, if the reason is transformed into the very essence, the substance of intuition, then the whole inner movement of the inner mind becomes a movement of intuition, organized as a reason is organized, that is to become active at will, answer all needs, comes into being the accordance with the methodological system. It is not something which appears and disappears. One does not know why or how. It is the result of transformation of the reason, which is the higher part of the human body, into a lighter, higher than the mental light or the light of intuition. So it becomes ordered, organized, instead of being spasmodic and uncoordinated, says our Divine Mother.
भद्रं बाहुभिः साधयामः रसूवै सह नमस्तेस्तु महारौद्रे महाघोरपराक्रमे महाबले महोत्साहे महाभयविनाशिनि त्राहि मां देवी दुष्प्रेक्ष्ये शत्रुणां भयवर्धिनि सर्वस्वरूपे सर्वस्ये सर्वशक्तिसमन्विते भयभ्यस्त्राहि नो देवी दुर्गे देवी नमस्तुते ॐ यस्मिन् सर्वे यतः सर्वे यः सर्वः सर्वतश्च यः यश्च सर्वमयो देवस्तस्मै सर्वात्मने नमः देवस्तस्मै सर्वात्मने नमः
तामुपेहि शरणं परमेश्वरि तामुपेहि शरणं परमेश्वरि तामुपेहि शरणं परमेश्वरि सर्वरूपमयी मीरा सर्वं मीरामयं जगत् ॐ गुरुभ्यो नमः ॐ देवेभ्यो नमः ॐ मीरा श्रीमीरायै नमः